Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being there. It's awesome to feel your energy there already. This is our first live. I'm just going to invite Araminta, the wonderful Araminta. There we go. Just 2 seconds. Welcome to Claire. Hi, David. Okay, so. Okay. So while we just wait for Araminta to join, I want you to perhaps have a think about a time when anxiety was actually a gift to you. If you can think of that. And we're just waiting. There we go. There's Araminta. Thank you, Claire. Feeling pretty anxious, but that was also the idea, was to challenge myself and to challenge Araminta to live through the anxiety. Oh, there's Araminta. There you go. As soon as Araminta comes in, I'll tell you a little bit about this wonderful woman.
Hello.
Hello, Araminta. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be on our first Instagram live together.
Absolutely. I'm really excited. So we've got a few viewers already, which is really exciting. Thank you for being here with us on our very first live. I will perhaps tell you all a little bit about Araminta Barbour, this wonderful human being that we've got. So Araminta and I met a few years ago in Mexico. I can't quite remember how many years ago. You are the founder of the beautiful retreat space, the Sanctuary in Guatemala, which is really just off the lake Atitlan with all its magic. You're also an international speaker, a coach, and a workshop facilitator. I met Araminta actually during one of these residential intensive workshops that Araminta does back in Mexico, like I said at the beginning. And I've got a blurb that I really like. It says, Araminta's core passion is the process of radical self-acceptance. And I love just that concept of radical self-acceptance, the inner marriage of love with power. She's here to support the return of ancient temple wisdom and practices for humanity's evolution as liberated, heart-centered creators. Because yeah, we create the world we're in. Araminta offers emotional release guidance, transformational workshops in Tantra. I'm reading this so that I don't miss anything, and conscious intimacy coaching. So, how are you doing today, Araminta?
Thank you. I was trying to remember when it was in Mexico. I think it was 2017. That's my guess.
2016.
2016, you think? Okay.
Right before I moved to Brunei, so it was 2016, yeah. Oh, welcome, Selena. So we decided to have this chat because obviously anxiety has terrible rap. And the truth is it can be debilitating. I mean, even thinking about this live, I did have moments where I thought, what if I have a blank? And then what if it's ridiculous? We might as well just record it first. It's safer. And of course, there are loads of people that have missed out on things. I was reading today Julia Samuel's book, a therapist, and she was an amazing therapist. And she was telling one of the situations where this incredibly powerful woman was designing a project, and then she just had a failure, and she went to her boss, sorry, I can't do this. And so they gave the project to someone else. But most of the work had been hers, and the project was amazing. But she just felt that fear, that anxiety, and it stopped her. And we all have stories like that, where we didn't follow up on something because we were too afraid or too anxious. But there's also the other side of anxiety, which is where there's a bit of fear or anxiety, there's also something exciting, something new, where we need to meet our boundaries and perhaps investigate it. And that's what we want to dive into a little. Oh, we've got
Yeah.
Michael and Kenya coming in. Thank you.
Yeah, I love this topic because I do think, I mean, so much of my work is around emotional intelligence, and it's like almost all the emotions have a bad reputation. And anxiety particularly is you know is just laden with shame. So it's like
Mm,
when we're actually experiencing it, we're also additionally beating ourselves up for the experience of it. And
yeah.
it's a real shame, haha, but because we really miss the gifts of our emotions, and that's sort of my core belief and the basis of so much of my work and a lot of the coaching is to how to support humans to actually love the sort of human technology of which our emotions are such a fundamental part.
And I love that expression you use of human technology. I love the way you say it that we're gifted with, we're born with this amazing human technology, and then we don't know how to use it because it didn't come with an instructions guide, and we just shut down these emotions. And one of the pieces of work you do is with emotional release, which is a lot of acknowledging all the spectrum, the whole spectrum of emotions, and letting them move through your body, letting them move through you. Because that's the other thing, or the other fear and shame is, how do I experience this emotion? So if it's anger, for example, which also gets terrible rap, it's because we know people have outbursts and say horrible things and do terrible things. I mean, the people that make us the most angry are normally the people we love the most too. And so how can we listen to these emotions and let them move through us? So emotional release, like things that you help people.
I think you're totally right. Anger is definitely one of the most demonized, especially it's like more intense, like rage. And what it reveals as a collective, we don't trust ourselves yet with the intensity of these energies, and we haven't seen it modeled, most of us, in mature ways. So we often, growing up, saw other adults not know what to do with these energies, and then
Mm.
express them in a way that hurt other people or hurt themselves or broke
Mm.
things. So we learn to fear this energy. Then we get a lot of programming that says, angry people are bad people and sort of unlovable. So then we start to create a whole belief system around us that says it's probably dangerous for me to have this energy in me, and it makes me bad. So, and anxiety is really similar as far as the negative messaging that we receive, like all over the place. You get those kind of like, sort of sport or skater or cool kid messages around no fear, just do it.
Just
And
do it.
it's like what we're taught over and over is to deny and suppress these feelings. And
Mm.
these are, collective energies that can move through our bodies. And if we're trying to fight and push them down, A, we're not getting the gifts of those energies. B, it takes a lot of life force energy to keep all these energies in the box. So we're
Mm-hmm.
actually exhausting ourselves. We're not getting the flow. We're not getting the information. And it's taking up even more energy to just
Mm-hmm.
like put the lid on and deny and repress. So we're
And so
cutting ourselves off in so
creating.
many ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So perhaps would you like to share a couple of strategies that would be, so perhaps we can, because of course, and that's one message I also want to really share is take it easy. There's so much self-help stuff out there. And it can be really easy to also just dive into all these different things or tap into all these little different things in an anxious way, trying to fix ourselves. And it's more like we're okay. We've got everything we need. But as long as we're willing to listen to what we do have, use this technology and seek help when we need to. So either with a coach or a psychologist or friends. I mean, friends are amazing also to help us
Mm.
move through things. So perhaps would you like to share some of your favorite go-to strategies for dealing with, say, emergency anxiety or even, yeah, it's,
Sure. I kind of want to make a distinction first, though, just because of like definitions of words, because often when I use the word anxiety, I'm defining a certain like energy frequency. And I differentiate that from what I would consider sort of panic. So I wanted to speak into both, because often it's like our human technology is giving us signals. But unfortunately, because most of us are so cut off from our own bodies and our own emotional technology, we don't get those messages at point early, or point easy. So then the signal increases and increases and increases. And then we have a very different situation to deal with.
And it's also a good reminder of boundaries. And that's one of the work that you do a lot of, and ISTA, International School of Temple Arts, also does, is understanding our own boundaries, learning to set boundaries, because often we're also not, we don't learn how to set them. It's just, we've got, as children, we get told you can do this, you can't do this, and that's very clear and easy. And then it's where boundaries are really malleable and have to. That's how we learn and we change, and our boundaries change too. But if we're not listening to ourselves and we don't know how to navigate those, we might force ourselves into a situation that becomes unsafe. The panic might come in because we just think, no, I should really do this. I should really do this because everybody's doing it, or because it's the right thing to do. But we're feeling it, thinking it here, but we're not really feeling it, and we're not ready for it. So that's where panic might kick in. So I just mentioned anxiety as an example. A friend of mine that I interviewed for the podcast gave an example that really touched me, which was she had the national coach come to her school to watch them training. And she knew they were going, some of them, or potentially some of them, would be selected for the national teams. This is a big deal. And she got so anxious that she didn't show up. And I don't know that she had a panic attack. I don't think so. I think it was just, she was a teenager, she was young and insecure. And so she just got all that anxiety building up and telling her, you can't do this. And she just didn't do it. So it's more for those moments of huge uncertainty and anxiety that I mean. And then, of course, I'd like to go into the routine stuff too, because of course we can't just live constantly on the edge and emergencies. That's not, we'll always be anxious then, right? So we take a step back and think about routines too.
Certainly. Well, I mean, for me, the message around fear and anxiety and even panic, they're messages from the system requesting, giving us information and getting us to take action. So usually once we move into whatever that action is, and I'll talk about how we can figure what that particular right action will look like, then the intensity of the signal will go down, because the emotions are here to deliver messages, and when they've done their job, they will dissipate when they've been listened to. So a huge part of what helps the whole relationship we have with an emotion like anxiety is first to kind of shift the brain frame around how we're holding our relationships. Because I know from my own experience, and most people, when an uncomfortable emotion like anxiety comes through our bodies, the first thing we try to do is kind of go, oh no, and we start fighting with it, and we're trying to control it. So if we can switch that initial response that's going on inside by getting curious, and that takes some reprogramming. That takes some reprogramming just from the mental level of trying to understand that these are your friends. They're here to give you a message. They only have your best interests at heart. These are sort of bodyguards, I like to see them. And they're here to keep you safe. They're here to give you energy to handle the situation that you're dealing with. And when we start to believe that, when we start to try to feel into that, that just softens our nervous system in and of itself, because it allows us to listen and sort of lean in, rather than try to go into some strategy to just get rid of this uncomfortability in the body. So that's definitely like a major ongoing reframe that it just changes everything in how we experience life in our bodies.
It allows you to take a step back too, because it reminds me also of one of the strategies that ISTA Level 1 shares, which is about becoming the hunter, right? And so if you don't want to scare the emotions away, because it's not really possible. They'll just come back at you and much bigger, but it's getting curious and noticing in your own body and in your mind what starts to happen. So say with anger, which is one that people get a lot of self-hate and hate about, is, oh, I'm feeling this thing. This means I'm getting angry, and either stopping the conversation lovingly, just, I can't do this right now. I can't have this conversation right now. I'd love to. So it's not denying the other person if it's another person involved. Yeah, getting curious and learning yourself what your signals are, so that you have time to not get into that state where it's all just too much to handle. So yeah, that's a great one. And
I want to just add, so I mean, for me, this sort of what I would call normal anxiety as opposed to panic, because panic itself can be an indication of trauma coming up. And I want to discuss that because I think it's important to distinguish. Normal anxiety, when it's coming up for me, it means a sort of a red flag in the sense of, am I procrastinating? Am I getting lost in other tasks when actually there's something quite important that needs to be done, and this energy is moving through me to actually get my attention and go, hello, what do you actually need to do? Because you need to prepare. There's something significant. We're here to help you get prepared. And if I look at it that way, and if I take that breath, meet it with gratitude, and ask myself, sort of inquire, okay, what is it that I truly need to do right now? That's actually truly important. Not all that I should be doing, but actually like the top one or two things that I need to do that's aligned with my, most important on purpose task, and prioritize that, or actually sit down and write out what are the things that I need to get done, because the energy that's coming through me in that moment can actually be used to get very focused. Because in a way, when you have that energy, it's like your heart starts to beat. There's quite a lot of blood like flushing through your system. I kind of call it tiger time, because it's our kind of primal instinctual system that's got into an alert. And we need our fear. Like these are the gifts of being human and having a body. This is like part of our neurology that has developed over, millennia. And it can be, it can be a pain in the ass if we don't understand how to integrate it. And I will talk about trauma and panic and separate, but it's here to give you the life force. It's kind of expanding all the sensory awareness for us to kind of take in, whatever changes are going on in our environment, so we can make sure that we're really aware of what the fuck is going. Can we swear on Instagram? What is going on, and what we need to really focus on. So for me, it's that gift. If I start to feel my anxiety building, it's like, okay, a part of my alarm system is coming up to say, hey, it's time to get focused. Let's do the most important thing. And that's a real gift to me. I'll get off Facebook and go do the thing.
and yeah, absolutely, because reminds me of the other side of what we typically show on Facebook, on Instagram, and what we see. I mean, there's all these filters, and everybody's always beautiful, and everything is just easy, and there's flow, and you just need to be reminded, okay, we don't need to necessarily share all those moments of challenge with the whole world, but we need to accept them for ourselves and accept them in a safe space, be that with our friends or with ourselves in journaling, but just live through that, because like you say, there's definitely a gift in there. And it's really interesting also to see how the difficulty we have dealing with other people's negative feelings, such as anxiety. If somebody expresses that they're really anxious, or that they're feeling upset, or that they're sad, we immediately just want to fix them and remind them, no, you're so lucky. It's right now we're living this pandemic. I read the other day that I think the Guardian is saying it's the biggest psychological study in the world, because we're going to gather so much information and so much richness about this, but still there's so much guilt in it, because it's like, well, I've got it pretty good. I live in a comfortable house. I'm safe at the end of the day. I haven't lost my job, or whatever reasons people have in their minds to feel like somebody else out there has it worse than them, which is also true. But it doesn't deny that this is a tough time we're all living through. And just like even if there wasn't a pandemic, life comes in ebbs and flows. And it's accepting those ebbs and listening to them, or just letting them come without trying to fix everything all the time.
Well, I love what you're bringing up, because obviously this is the intensity on the planet has just been like ramping up and ramping up. And there's almost a double edge to what's going on now that I hear you describing, in the sense of sort of it's now kind of the collective energy is an anxiety. And so then there becomes, because we are tribal, we've got a sort of a herd wiring. There's a natural tendency to sort of want to fit in and vibrate the same as everybody else. So what's interesting with emotional energy is when we're feeling a difficult to us emotion, we can suppress it, or we can try to project it out onto others, which means, let's say I'm angry. And instead of knowing how to be with that anger and how to feel it, get the messages from it and vibrate it through my body, I could try to throw it out and get you to feel the same. So I might, rant about politics or rant about the injustices that I see in the world. And the moment that you're vibrating in that angry, pissed off way and irritated, I'll feel better. Have you ever noticed that? There's a way of like handing off the energy and then getting the other person to vibrate it. And it's like, oh, now I feel relieved now because I've handed it to you. So now what's happening is I feel is like the collective is vibrating in anxiety. And then some people are feeling like, is it okay that I'm not? Like, so I'm actually doing okay in this moment, but I should be. The word should is, a classic red flag. So there's a lot of complexity going on with the emotional waves that are happening on the planet. And I think one of the major gifts of, let's say, emotional intelligence tools, such as the ones that we share at the ISTA level 1 retreats, is this ability to use your breath and sound and movement in your body to let whatever is authentically alive inside you to be felt, so that you have a point of reference and a point of freedom, so that you can get the messages of whatever's moving through you and not need to suppress it or not need to project it out. It also allows us to kind of have some independence from collective waves. It's still like we're still in touch with what's happening, but I can vibrate it and know that what's mine and what's not mine. And these tools are very simple. And really the 3 keys are just using breath, sound, and movement, and giving yourself permission to use the breath as a way to drop your attention inside your body temple and be that gateway between the inner and the outer worlds. Use sound because sound is vibrational and it allows you to express, and we can make a gazillion billion types of sounds. So this is the most incredible musical instrument we'll ever be given. And when we give ourselves permission to sound out what's going on in our inner worlds, when we find that match, it's like it's been felt fully. And similarly, when we add movement to that, when we allow our bodies to vibrate in a way that helps us give momentum to what's happening in our inner worlds, when we find that match, then the feeling has been received in a very meaningful way. And usually it dissipates. And usually some kind of insight or wisdom drops as well into the mind as we get a sort of click. And we don't need to fight with it in the same way that most of us do.
And we don't need to word everything, to put everything into words, because you're reminding me of an exercise that Shashi Saluna does. Okay. And it involves breath, sound, and movement. It's a specific for couples activity, but it involves all those. And often in couples, there will be moments, well, not even couples, just within ourselves, we know that there are moments where we're not feeling very comfortable, something's unsettled. And we might either suppress that Or we might try to mentally organize it all and understand immediately what does this mean and force that message to come. Or sometimes sound, breath, and movement will just help us to tap in. And especially with the exercise I love for couples is instead of trying to say everything you want to say to each other, sometimes just sound out and move with each other, you know? So it can be a roar, it can be whatever, but just that authenticity. And of course, to some people, this might seem silly, but if we think of it, it's definitely not helpful to be saying things that we will regret 2 minutes later, just because all we needed was to move and to let some voice out, you know? And so yeah,
That
definitely
works.
sound movement.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the percentages are, but I think they say like, 90 or 97% of communication is not the words anyway. So we
Mm-hmm.
actually are mostly communicating through reading energetics. But of course, we live in a very mind focused, verbal focused world at the moment, and we've been taught that we need to understand everything on the mental level. But the joy of having this full human technology is that, yeah, there's incredible amounts of information coming through other channels, and exactly as you say, when we allow them to move, they're just as effective, if not more so. And what you just described, that practice, that also works beautifully with erotic energy.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than trying to express yourself with poetic, erotic language, just use sound and movement. So, side note, because we can overthink things. Go for it.
I'm just thinking, just looking at the time, and it's 5:30. And so just to give you an idea, and I didn't tell listeners how long we would be on. So I was thinking maybe another 15 minutes, 30 max, but we'll see how it goes. And I don't know if it's got a cost for you guys, so you'll see what it is at some point too. Um, okay. I'm thinking actually now you have just completed a brand new cycle of a new project too. Your resilience.
Yes,
Just
I have. Yeah, I literally
that.
finished it yesterday. Um, so Resilience Journey is an online course, and basically it's there to support us to make sure that we're not carrying trauma from the past into the present. It's particularly focused for those of us that are going through endings. So whether that's relationship endings, health challenges, loss of jobs, because so much of my work is focused on the transformational life, death, rebirth cycle. So it's a community journey that supports, in a nutshell, although we avoid pain and we avoid thinking about our pain, when we're courageous enough to go back and revisit challenging moments, there's so much gold there. So it's a guided journey to support us to have the skills and the presence to go back and particularly do some of the emotional healing work so that we've healed and we've got the gifts and information from those difficult chapters so that they're informing us now, but they're not debilitating us now. And what I've noticed, particularly when it comes to, I've done like almost 10 years of relationship coaching now, most of us haven't kind of cleared up the scars of our past. So we've sort of armored up our hearts, but we're hoping to, create a new partnership. But we've got all this defense mechanisms and stories and beliefs about how lovable we are or how challenging relationships are going to be. And until we've kind of really come to peace and to gratitude with all the learnings that got us to this moment, we tend to sabotage and we tend to just loop, and the patterns come back even though we may be with someone completely new, different name, different face, and yet the sort of energetic patterns are just looping and looping. So I wanted to create something also particularly for these challenging times where there's so much instability, to support anyone, and particularly my sort of apprentices, to become more resilient in navigating what we call the sort of the death portal. It's really how do we become more masterful at letting go of what we knew, who we thought we were going to be, and die to that self. It's really a self-death, and let ourselves be reborn and trust life enough to, and our own human technology, to guide us into the next chapter of our life. So yeah, it's been
That
beautiful. We've just
illusion of
been journeying with about 20
protection.
people through
Oh,
that.
awesome. Cool. And I was just thinking of those layers of protection that keep us separate from those that we want to be connected with. This illusion of protection, because of course, if when we're really close to people, they can hurt us. When we're really open to people and vulnerable, we're vulnerable. However, if we're in our little tower, all safe, nobody's going to see our gifts. We won't be able to share our gifts either. And so there is that strength and vulnerability too, which is,
It's the greatest strength, but it's, it's terrifying in a way. And maybe that helps us circle back to, how I differentiate between anxiety and, let's say, panic. Panic may be caused by PTSD, some sort of trauma in the past. And that is not uncommon. Most of us have some sort of unresolved trauma that has been stored in the body that would totally serve us to heal and for me, the great news is if you are having panic attacks, that's the great news, that wow, whatever that is now ready to be, it's coming up to the surface. So often what happens,
from a different generation, it might not necessarily even be a story that we will ever remember. It might be from something from someone else in our lineage. And now it's just that we're ready to learn from it.
and that's the way I look at it, because for me, it's like if there's a vibration moving through my body, that's life force. It may be uncomfortable. I may have a story, a belief that it's hijacking my present moment, but ultimately it's life force. And if I can give my attention to it, there's some gift going to come. And so the work I do, and we do a lot with an ISTA, is this sort of somatic trauma release. And, just in a nutshell, as an easy takeaway for most of your listeners, shaking is probably one of the most easy and powerful, immediately helpful tools. So if you're noticing that you're having anxiety, my first gift is the breath, some touch. So whether it's just a hand on your heart, depending on where you are, but there's a somatic reassurance that we can give ourselves through touch that's immediate to the nervous system. And that deep breath.
Yeah.
And then releasing, making sound on the exhale. So these deep breaths, and depending on where you are, really, so again, using sound as that vibrational key, but then allowing yourself to do that inquiry. It's like there's a message coming through. This information is to keep us safe. If we're pretty sure that we're not in immediate life-threatening danger, then reaffirming that to ourselves internally of like, I'm safe. Right? Or some sort of I'm lovable is another big one, if we're feeling like we're about to put our foot in it.
We're not trying to bypass any of these feelings. We're feeling them and acknowledging them, but it's being truly present. So of course, if we are in a situation, a scenario where we probably are not safe for some reason, then we also need to acknowledge that and just get out of there. But yeah, for sure. Yesterday, Esther Perel you're saying about the touch, and Esther Perel started one of her talks with a big collective imaginary hug. And it was something just like that, where it is so important. And I mean, especially in these times where we can't hug as many people as before. I know I miss that. I miss that a lot because I've been so isolated. Now that I'm beginning to see people, I really need to check myself to not just jump into a hug, because that's how I communicate. I'm like, you're my person. So it's really interesting times too with those changes. Thinking back to resilience, and it's also amazing how, of course, it's easy. Some people are born resilient, right? They go through all sorts of things and experiences that we think are super traumatic, and I wouldn't be able to deal with that, and come out the other side smiling. And yet they find ways to deal with it, to manage it, to live through it, and to see the beauty in life. Whereas there are other people that seemingly have a perfect life or a happy life and seem to have everything going for them. You know, these are all expressions you hear. And yet they're just, they don't feel happy, or they see all the challenges as huge and, you know, belittling them. And Esther Perel also shares, for example, the experience of her parents who in concentration camps and just have this resilience and community. Community is huge. That's another thing that, of course, these groups that you work with, typically they're actually intensive face to face, and there's that real community tribal feeling and support where we mirror each other. We know that we mirror each other. And so it's just so much easier to see or to recognize feelings or emotions and behaviors in others, and then go back to, oh, I connect to this and I can see this. So there's definitely that beauty in working with other people to heal ourselves or to improve ourselves. And with the resilience piece, I was also thinking, I remember reading, I can't remember where, a couple who had left a concentration camp, and they just felt guilty. And it was like all these other people had died, and you know, he lived through hell, but he just felt like guilty because he was still alive. And then there was a shift that made the whole difference. And the shift was he saw that he was here. He had the gift of being here. So it was almost like he had to share the story of what he'd experienced and the story that all these other people weren't able to share, so that we don't do it again. And it's finding that resilience to use the stories, to use the things we've lived through and learn from them and even help others. And that's
Exactly. You know, I think the choice point of power that we have is the creative storyteller. And so we're myth making beings, and we're constantly rewriting, you know, who we are and what's happening and how our place in that story. And so resilience is partly, you know, linked to our self-belief and our self-esteem, but that can be up-leveled, and that's just a daily choice. And so the challenge is there's a tendency to play what I call the get out of jail card free, which is a Monopoly analogy. It's like when something kind of difficult or challenging or tragic happens to you, there's a period of obviously natural grieving and recuperation. But after that, it can be pretty hard to give up that card, because if I say, you know, God, when I was 7, XYZ happened to me, there's a collective agreement for there to be a response to that. Perhaps people allow me to behave a certain way, or I get some kind of energetic response, and I can become unconsciously addicted to that response, which means that I may get overly identified with being the person that lived through XYZ when I was 7 years old. So the challenge with healing is we have to be at a point where we're tired of playing that card because it's preventing us from our next level of identity. Because you're going to have to give up the story around that happened. Of course, that still happened, but my whole story that I tell about what that means about who I am has to die and has to be reborn. And each of us has that creative potential at all times to rewrite the story around what an event means about who we are. So resilience is definitely about reminding ourselves that we always have this creative power and we have this responsibility. And at the same time, you definitely need to be able to be deeply compassionate and have, you know, support when we're going through dark nights of our soul and when everything's melting. So we have a lot of people in the course who are going through deaths of loved ones, divorces, just lost their jobs. It's not about undermining how challenging those chapters are in our lives and how acutely painful those emotions can be, and how difficult it is when, you know, all your bearings about, you know, what you thought your life was going to be like are melting. So it's definitely not to undermine it. If anything, I designed this course because I find those moments in life to be the most powerful. They're the most, we feel like we're, you know, falling apart, and we are, But from another perspective, shamanically speaking, you're actually at your most powerful, because in those moments where you don't know what's coming and you don't really know who you are and your story of what you're good at and everything is just gone, you actually have the window to be able to write a new story, and you can make amazing jumps out of that. And we can do that by going back in time and revisiting painful chapters, and again using our creative power to rewrite them. And that has amazing impacts for how we navigate the present moment and what kind of self-belief we have and what kind of life we're going to create for ourselves. So yeah, I'm super passionate about that.
No, and it definitely helps too to have somebody that can external to you that can support you in moving through those. So either a friend or a coach or a group like what you're organizing to help you move through that, to acknowledge what's happening too, and yeah, and to help you through that, because so much of who we are is also in the collective, is also in our tribe. I mean, I can be all I want in this little box and so on, but it's all about then the real me is all about how I interact with my people. And so that's one of the things of doing courses or intensive retreats is people might have huge insight and just see the world in a different way and see themselves in a different way, have discovered this different pieces, but then they get home and reality hits and then they just think, oh, this is all a lie. Whereas it's really important to know, set your expectations right too, because I mean, if I have had that shift or that change in my identity, it doesn't mean that everyone around me is ready for it or understands it, or can support it. So it's important to also to be kind and empathetic to ourselves and also to others. There's like that, all that to manage.
I think what you're talking about is, I mean, I think the challenge with the sort of the whole self-development movement or even the healing movement is that, you know, the part of each of us that has the story that we're broken or we're not good enough or we're never going to be loved or whatever, you know, those core wounds, is always looking for the you know, the holy grail of healing, you know, and it often fits that storyline of, you know, if I could, I'll eventually, you know, do the detox and get the abs, or, you know, do that amazing healing session, or I'll finally make the money, or whatever it is. There's a million kind of cures, and then I'll be lovable, and then I'll be successful. Yeah. And so anytime we're coming from that mindset, which, you know, we switch in and out of it all the time, but whenever we're coming from that place, all we're doing is we're reaffirming how we're not okay now. Yeah, we're reaching out, we're buying the shiny thing, whatever that is, whether that's a self-development program or a new sports car. It's still coming from a lack. So one of the key pieces to really anchor in change is to understand vibrationally when we're going into scarcity and when we're feeling anchored in ourself and aligned. And, you know, there's ways of guiding ourselves to feel that in our body, and then to make it a practice to return to checking in, like which of the two kind of sides of the coin am I in? Because you said at the beginning, you know, anxiety and excitement, fear and desire are actually vibrationally somewhat similar in the body. You know, the rapid heart, the blood rushing through, the sort of, you know, the intensity of like taking in information around us. There's an aliveness that comes through the body. But the story we're telling ourselves about what's happening is in two different positions. So when we start to take responsibility for the creative capacity we have to make that switch, wow, big changes happen.
And also, you reminded me there of the idea of good enough. What is good enough? Because it can be easy, even on these journeys of self-development. I discover this old wound and I heal it, and then I discover this other thing, and I want to get to a point, and I don't live the now. I don't live the present. I'm not here because I'm always projecting something else, someone else.
Yeah, the never-ending healing journey. I Yeah, I'm passionate about this. Like, we're done. The frame now is we're done. We've done it. Now we're just expanding.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
It's like, because that's a different, it's like we're constantly, you can get really frustrated and tired every time I become aware of yet another limiting belief I have, that, or I can be excited that, wow, it's come to the surface so I can expand to the next level. Again, it's a mental frame. What I find so important, and what I'm so grateful for my mentors, is that coaching helps me to become more aware of how quickly and easily I can love the journey, because it is falling in love with the journey and not getting hooked on some goal of actually ever arriving anywhere. Because that's where the ease really comes in. It's got to come in now. So anytime I'm catching myself in a one-day story, I'm reaffirming, I'm being unloving to myself. And I can beat myself up about that, or I can be like, great, I just caught myself. I'm expanding. So
Yeah, you hunt that. Yeah. And I just love that we can learn so much from children in that presence too, because with little children don't have any problem showing their anger or showing their fear or showing any of those. And then it's interesting that the School of Life also talks a lot about this, where we are born as this blob, basically, and everybody loves us, and all we need to do is exist. Everybody looks at us, and we've got googly eyes, and we're cute and adorable and lovable. We poop and we're funny, everything is cute about a baby. And then suddenly there's this shift, and then there's this disconnect too, is the world is not me, I'm separate from the world. And then there are all these expectations, and it feels like, oh, dad doesn't love me anymore because he shouted at me, or all these, suddenly we have to do the dishes or make our bed to feel lovable. And the expectations of course grow as we grow, and also we get these emotions shut down as, you're a big girl, don't cry, um, that's embarrassing. Don't shout. All these things, but we're not given an alternative. I mean, some people see it as modeled, but some don't. And so we have to kind of learn it the hard way sometimes.
yeah, I mean, I think a vital step, at least for my journey, and I know for hundreds of others now, due to the work I've been able to do, is reframing and reclaiming your right to your full emotional intelligence will support you on whatever it is that you wish to do in this life. And I think children are an amazing reminder, because they haven't received all the programmings, obviously. They're naturally alive, and they feel their feelings, and they don't cling to it for 10 years and harden up, and they're so flexible, and partly I think, and they have so much energy, I think partly because they're allowing their emotional energy to be expressed. And I'm not saying we should all, have tantrums in the middle of the supermarket every day, but it would probably be healthier if we were having a little bit more tantrums, and actually feeling what we're feeling, and instead of numbing ourselves out on entertainment and drugs.
There's a spectrum. Because again, even going back to children, the way they move their body, we drag ourselves. Adults tend to drag themselves to places. I sometimes skip on the street, but I know that it looks a bit silly, but I don't care. But typically, adults drag themselves to places. Children, they skip everywhere, they run everywhere. There's this energy, and they just move that energy. So if we can, and of course, there's safe ways and appropriate ways. We won't go into a meeting, everybody's in shirt and tie, and we probably won't do all sorts of movement, but we can do that before the meeting. We can move our body.
Well, the fact that we don't skip down the street as adults is a great, example of how the sort of the collective paradigm is just so limited to what is an acceptable expression of energy. And, apparently we all want to be happy and joyful and, more compassionate, but we suppress our joy just as much as our grief. I mean, so many people think, oh, I've got to go do healing work because I'm going to tap into all this rage. And then they end up laughing for an hour and a half because they've been suppressing their laughter, and they're just like boxed ourselves into such a small little tight contracted ball. And the journey of expansion is all linked, because you're not going to feel more joy in your life if you don't feel your grief, because it's actual just an overall permission to be alive and to be authentic. So yeah, it's a great journey, because it means reconnecting to your authentic self. It doesn't have to be such a big, hard journey. It just feels actually liberating, So I want to kind of keep penetrating the idea that it has to be so hard.
Yeah, and that's really what we need, is just that authenticity. That's what the world needs. Every single person has a unique gift to give to the world, or lots of different gifts, but every single person has something that no one else can give. I truly believe in this. It's something that Seth Godin says, it's something that Marie Forleo says, it's something that lots of people say, but we often forget this because we tend to say, I could have not done this live because, other people do it and they do it better. Or I might not have a podcast because there are other people that are more specialized in things. And you can really beat yourself down. Whereas if you're authentic and yourself, and you delve into these things and lean into these curiosities and remain open, you'll definitely come out into the world with gifts. And
well, the gift is you. You are the gift. You don't have to do anything. If it brings you joy, then go do it. I mean, it's different when we think, well, I should be doing it, or, we're trying to people please or get a certain result. That always kind of weighs us down. But if we're just doing it because it actually feels aligned to us, then you're moving with energy in a very different way, and it doesn't burn us out. And it's just fun. And yeah, go for it.
Adriaga is, I don't know if I said that correctly, saying if I don't have a tantrum every now and then, it becomes an ugly monthly mental breakdown. And it's good to have other needs too. What are your needs? What are your expressive needs? And just like you said earlier on, how can I do this in a way that is safe for myself and for the others around me, right? Because of course we're not saying, just like you said, it doesn't need to be a tantrum out in the street or being violent to somebody. There are ways of moving this energy of expressing ourselves that are authentic and safe.
And self-loving.
And self-loving, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, a tantrum is one of the emotional intelligence tools we use as a way of, almost in honor of all the 2-year-olds. It's lying on your back with your feet flat on the ground and your knees bent and your head flat. You want to protect your neck. And yeah, allowing yourself to shake your body and thump your feet and your hands and make sound. Because even if your life is perfect right now, turn on the news. Unless you've armored yourself so completely that you don't feel a thing because you've shut down yourself from trauma, then there's a lot of feelings there's a lot of life force to move through your body, and some kind of practice, body practices is vital right now. So yeah, I do think it's healthy. Unfortunately, we judge ourselves for being crazy or not okay when we're having these emotional expressions. And that, if you can give yourself permission to actually honor and respect yourself for doing the feeling work and really see it as an act of love, you won't beat yourself up, put that second arrow in, as they say in Buddhism. And that can be key.
Just allow yourself to feel. And even music might be a way that people can find, just dancing to some music, having it blasting loudly, whatever works. But just allowing that movement. Okay, I think we could wrap up. Oh, I just have a little quote from Julia Samuels, her book, This Too Shall Pass, and it's about anxiety that I like to share. And it goes like this. Anxiety, and this also reminds me of your course with the resilience and new beginnings. Anxiety often accompanies new beginnings. The not knowing can scare us. Anxiety is a form of energy that forces us to adjust, informing us we have to shift our role, behavior, or view. We need to shed the old way of being, like reptiles shed their skin, for a new way of being to grow. And this was a lot of what you said too, is just changing those stories.
Yeah, it's great to feel anxiety. It's totally normal. Your human technology is working if you're feeling anxious at the start of a new chapter. If you're doing something new for the first time, it's it's bang on schedule. This energy is there to support you to get prepared, to be fully in your body, to give you the extra energy to take everything in and to be really present. So nothing's wrong. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just learning to breathe into it.
I think with that, I want to say thank you, and we'll probably wrap up.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been fun. I'm grateful to share my first Instagram with you and on this topic. I want to offer your podcast listeners a discount if the resilience course is resonating, and just give everyone $100 off. So what we've done is we're going to do another community course starting in September. And just for the next 2 weeks, for those that just want to jump in right away, there's a self-study option, which still gives you access to the discussion threads and all the feedback from before, but it allows you just to do it at a cheaper price and in your own time. So there's 2 different options now. And I wanted to ask you about what did you say?
Tell us about the September option. So the option for now would be self-guided, right? They would watch
Yeah.
videos and see the community.
Yeah, I mean, there's 45 videos and there's guided meditations and assignments all ready for you to go at your own pace, and you get 40 days access. The community course is covering the same content, but with live calls once a week and my additional coaching with me and all your questions answered, and sort of the added benefit of kind of going through a process with a group of other people that are navigating whatever it is they're navigating. So for those of us that sometimes buy courses but then never do them, the community course also has that sort of additional accountability as well as just the power of community. And you get lifetime access with the community course, because what most people are finding is they want to go back and revisit other chapters in their life that they want to kind of clear up.
And I really don't want to take for granted that piece of accountability of the other seeing us and helping us. Because even if we do go through things, it's just so much harder to go through things alone. Whereas if we're witnessed by other people that understand what we're doing, it's that much more doable. And you can definitely go a bit deeper too, because you've got that support and that accountability, and you can reach out to this group and see what they're going through, which also gives you a bit more energy.
Yeah, I mean, we have such gifts for each other, and we as mirrors, as you say. It's a catch-22 because like no one can do the work for us. So on that level, we are alone. But when you do a community course and you can hear other people's stories, it really does help us cut through the victim story that says, why me? It's really only me that life's kind of being this cruel to. And then we go, wow, this is part of the human journey. And the human journey is epic, and at times it's epically challenging. But our capacity and our courage and our strength blows us away as well. So
yeah, we can surprise ourselves for sure. Well, thank you so much. Look at this timing. It's 2 minutes to 6. I love this. Thank you.
So I'll put a link to the course, but basically it's all on my website, aramintabarbour.com. And just remember to give you guys the discount. The code is BUNNY, BUNNY, after your podcast. And that'll give you $100 off.
Yeah, we'll share that link, and I will say this for the podcast too, for those that want to listen afterwards, so then we can share that link there too. So thank you very much, Araminta. Namaste.
My pleasure. Thanks again.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. Thanks for being with us.